I was married for 54 years. 54 years to a good man named James. He wasn't cruel. He didn't gamble or drink or raise his hand to me. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man you could build a life with. And I did. We built a life together in this house in Portland, Oregon. And I thought, for most of those 54 years, that I was the luckiest woman alive. That's what people told me anyway. "You're so lucky," they'd say. "James is such a good husband." And I'd nod and smile because that's what wives did. That's what I was taught to do. But here's the truth that I couldn't say out loud until after he died. I was more profoundly lonely during those 54 years of marriage than I have ever been in the 12 years since his death, living alone in this same house. I know how that sounds. I know people think I'm supposed to miss him desperately, to be devastated, to be waiting for something or someone to fill the empty space he left behind. But the space he left behind was never really empty. It was finally, quietly, mine. James and I met in 1958 in Manchester in a library. He was studying engineering, and I was doing research for my boss. He was handsome in that understated British way. Dark hair, kind eyes, hands that looked like they could build things. He asked me to dance at a friend's wedding, and I said yes, and that was that. We got married a year later. I was 25 years old, and I thought I knew what marriage meant. I thought it meant companionship. I thought it meant being seen. What it actually meant was becoming invisible. Not all at once. It happens slowly, like the way the light fades at dusk in England. You don't notice the exact moment it happens, but suddenly it's dark. James was a good husband in the way that mattered to the outside world. He provided, he was faithful, he came home every evening, he never forgot our anniversary. But he didn't see me, not really, not the way I needed to be seen. I would try to tell him things, important things, small things. I'd tell him about a book I was reading, about something that frightened me, about a dream I'd had, about something I wanted to do with my life. And he would listen in that polite British way we were both taught. He would nod. He would make appropriate sounds. And then he would turn back to his newspaper or his television program, and I would be alone again, even though he was sitting right next to me on the sofa. The loneliness of marriage is different from the loneliness of solitude. When you're alone, you're alone. You accept it. You make peace with it. You learn to be your own company. But when you're married and lonely, you're constantly aware of the contradiction. You're surrounded by another person, and you're still invisible. You're supposed to be happy because you're not alone, but you are alone, which means you're failing somehow. You're failing at marriage. You're failing at being the kind of wife who is satisfied with what she has. So I stopped trying to be seen. I stopped talking about the things that mattered to me. I learned to be quiet in a different way than the British quiet I was raised with. I learned to be quiet in the way of someone who understands that her words don't matter. I managed the household. I raised our 3 children. I was a competent wife. I was not a happy one, but competence was what was asked for, so competence was what I provided. And here's the cruel part. The part that makes me angry even now, 12 years after his death. James didn't know he was making me lonely. He thought we were happy. In his mind, he was a good husband because he provided and was faithful and came home at night. He didn't understand that marriage could be a lie while still being respectable. He didn't understand that 2 people could be legally bound and emotionally separate. After we moved to America, I was 39, and we came to Portland so he could take a job with an engineering firm. Things got worse. America is a big country, and Portland felt very far from everything I knew. I didn't have my mother nearby. I didn't have my sisters. I had James, and I had the children, and I had a house in a neighborhood where everyone was friendly, but no one really knew me. I made friends with the wives of James's colleagues, and we had coffee and talked about schools and recipes, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. I remember one afternoon. It was winter, and it was raining, the way it rains in Portland, soft and relentless. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and James came home from work. He kissed me on the top of my head, the way he always did, and asked what was for dinner. And I thought very clearly, I am sitting across from this man every single day, and he has never asked me what I want. Not really, not in a way that matters. He's never asked if I'm happy. He's never asked if I regret leaving England. He's never asked what I dreamed about as a girl before I became someone's wife. So I stopped expecting to be asked. And in stopping, I became truly lonely in a way I hadn't been before. It was the loneliness of giving up. But here's what I didn't understand then, what I only understand now, looking back at those 54 years. The loneliness I felt wasn't something James did to me. It was something I allowed to happen by accepting the lie that marriage automatically means companionship. I believed the lie. We all did. We were told that if you married the right person, you would never be alone again. And when you were alone, despite being married, you blamed yourself. You thought you were too demanding, too needy, too complicated. You thought there was something wrong with you. There wasn't. There was something wrong with the lie. I didn't realize this until James died. It sounds strange, but his death was the kindest thing that ever happened to me because it freed me from the lie. Suddenly, I wasn't failing at marriage anymore. I wasn't expected to be happy with someone's presence while experiencing their absence. I was just alone. And being alone, I discovered, was infinitely less lonely than being married and unseen. In the 12 years since James died, I have learned what companionship actually is. It's not someone sitting next to you. It's not someone providing and being faithful. It's someone who sees you, someone who asks you questions and listens to the answers, someone who wonders what you're thinking, someone who cares if you're happy. I have 3 friends now. 3. Not the dozens of acquaintances I had during my marriage, but 3 people who actually know me. One of them is a British woman who moved to Portland about the same time I did. We sit in coffee shops and talk about what it means to be British women in America, and we laugh about the things that confuse us, and we admit the things that frighten us. Another is a woman from my book club who realized I wasn't just being polite when I said I didn't want to go to certain events. I actually didn't want to go. The third is my daughter Maggie, who lives in Boston and calls me every 2 weeks, and we talk about books and life and the fact that our family was never as close as it appeared to be from the outside. These 3 friendships, these 3 genuine connections, are worth more to me than 54 years of being in the same room as someone who loved me but didn't see me. Do I miss James? Sometimes. I miss the routine of him. I miss the way he would hold my hand while we watched television. I miss having someone to make breakfast for. But I don't miss the loneliness. I don't miss the lie. And that's the thing about widowhood that people don't understand when they're offering their condolences. Sometimes losing someone is actually a relief. Sometimes being alone is actually less lonely than being married. The world doesn't like to hear this. It's not romantic. It's not the story we're supposed to tell. We're supposed to grieve and mourn and eventually remarry or accept our solitude with grace and a little bit of sadness. We're not supposed to say, "I was happier alone than I ever was married." We're not supposed to admit that the companionship we were promised was a lie. But I'm 91 years old, and I've learned that lies are most dangerous when everyone believes them. When we all nod and pretend that marriage is automatically companionship, we condemn lonely wives to feel like failures. When we tell women that they should be grateful for a husband who provides and is faithful, even if he doesn't see them, we teach them that their needs don't matter. When we insist that widowhood is worse than a bad marriage, we erase the experiences of women who know the truth, that you can be married and utterly alone, and you can be alone and utterly not lonely. I'm not saying marriage is always a lie. I've seen marriages where two people actually see each other, where companionship is real. My youngest daughter, Elizabeth, has that kind of relationship with her husband. I watched them together, and I understood that what I had with James was missing something essential. But I had made my choice, and I lived with it, and I survived it. And now, in my final years, I have something James and I never had. I have peace. I have the quiet company of my own thoughts. I have 3 real friends. I have this house that is entirely mine. I have my own routine, my own schedule, my own life that doesn't require me to be anyone except myself. If you're married and you feel lonely, I want you to know that you're not failing. The lie is failing. You are not the problem. And if you're a widow or widower who feels relief instead of devastation, please don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that. Grief is complicated. Relief is allowed. 54 years I spent trying to be seen by someone who loved me but couldn't quite look. 12 years I've spent being seen by no one but myself. And I would give up 50 more years of marriage to keep these 12 years of solitude. That's the truth about marriage that no one tells you when you're young and in love and convinced that someone else is going to complete you. Sometimes the person you marry isn't the person you need. Sometimes the lie is bigger than the love. Sometimes the loneliest place in the world is the one you share with someone else. But sometimes, and this is the part that matters, sometimes you survive it. Sometimes you get out. Sometimes you find yourself alone at 91 in a house in Portland, Oregon, thousands of miles from where you were born, and you realize that you're finally, completely, exactly where you need to be. Thank you for sitting with me while I said this out loud. If you want to sit with me again, I'll be here. I'm always here now. And for the first time in my life, that doesn't feel like a sentence. It feels like freedom. Tomorrow I'll be 92, and I'll make my tea in the morning, and I'll read my book, and I'll take my walk around the neighborhood, and I'll feel the sun on my face, and I won't feel lonely for a single moment. Not because I found someone to fill the silence, but because I finally learned to love the silence myself. That's what widowhood taught me. That's what marriage couldn't. I hope you'll come back and listen again. There's so much more I want to tell you about what I've learned in these 91 years, about the things I regret and the things I'm grateful for, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. But for now, I just want you to know, if you're lonely inside a marriage, you're not alone in that. And if you're alone and you're not lonely, don't let anyone convince you that's something to be ashamed of. Take care of yourself, especially when you're the only one you have.